Earlier games, there's a notion of recruiting people. We called it giving them the magic Kool-Aid from time to time. We sometimes spin it as a religious moment, and we usually use music as the metaphor of you're going and maybe you're Elvis and you're going into their city and they like your rock and roll, so they come with you. And we echo that game in the cultural game of Civ as well. So it's important in the worship game for space that when I'm coming down and I'm trying to buy into my gospel and buy into me as the supreme being, that I reference back to the tribe game and the Civ game where you had similar kind of recruitment of those creatures. Trade also is referencing back to the earlier games in Tribe and a clear metaphor for space games. Missions, the challenge of missions, I think the goal of missions was to give players, I've heard a lot of times that when players, we've sat down in focus groups and early on when the game didn't tell them exactly what to do and the player who's sitting down to play says, what am I supposed to do? And if we give them the answer, anything you want, the world is your oyster, do whatever you want. There's a pretty healthy demographic of player that encumbers them. They get overwhelmed by their choices, and there's certain people that love that and love just going, okay, I'm going to try whatever I want. But there's another player that really likes to have some direction and some focus. The challenge with missions is that the space game is meant to be open-ended, so we couldn't script missions as you normally would, and we had to come up with a system to procedurally generate missions, like everything else in the game, that was pulling in modules to create the missions, try and make them feel unique every time you see them. And to do that, we were really having to play off the pollinated content, to have them go and look for pollinated content, to have them use the pollinated content and insert it into the mission and try and wrap as many different fictions in as possible. Badges were are one of our key ways for that player who does feel lost if you just say whatever you want, do whatever you want. Badges were just a clear win of a reward system so that players that want to move.
Did you edit the slides?
Are you newsflashing? So this was an early proposal. There's a slide after this, Will. Back to the trailer.
Oh, okay.
So basically, we have a huge game to build, and no one's going to give us all the time we want. I mean, to build this game, we could work on this game forever, and it was really important to try and figure out what's the 10% that gives us the most. What do we deliver on that is the biggest win?
Yeah, as you can see from that brief overview, there are just so many moving parts to what that space game could become. You know, we have to ship it someday. It all has to be kind of polished, tested, etc. So it really is a matter of figuring out what is the best, fraction of that hangs together well. And, really, if you get like the best third or fourth of that, that's going to get you 80 or 70% of the gameplay. And that's true usually in most game designs I've kind of encountered. Now, so that's the space game, which is really the big open-ended epic part of Spore. But yet, getting there, we actually go through these other previous phases. We basically have the evolution to tribal, building your city, and then your civilization. Now, each one of these, basically we kind of thought of as referencing some genre. Evolution was a little weird, but the Civ one was clearly Risk, civilization, kind of a light Civ. City, kind of a very, very simple Sim City, tribal, roughly populous. And the evolution was kind of this weird third-person eater thing. But Alex is going to talk a little bit now about kind of unifying those core levels.
Do you want to talk about City before I do that? Or?
No, I'll let you talk about City. But one of the things we also did is we storyboarded, what the player experience might be through these levels, which helped us think about, kind of what the player viewpoint is in all this.
Yeah, I think one of the big challenges, I was reminded last night with a few drinks that we were challenging one of the core rules of game design, which is that you shouldn't mix genres. And I think Will saw that as a very specific challenge early on that he was going to prove wrong. But we're actually challenging something else on a deeper level, which gives us a lot of stress, and that is whether you can change the player's viewpoint of who they are in the world as you play. So in the creature game or the cell game, you're an avatar. You're actually a little creature driving around the world, interacting with objects in the world. And then as soon as you hit tribe, you start to pull back from your creature. And the aim here is actually to give you that feeling of the powers of 10, to say, here is a little cell and the camera is in really, really tight and it's essentially 2D. Then I'm in a sort of 3D world. Then I'm sort of looking down on my bunch of guys. Then I'm looking down on my planet. And then I'm in space and I'm flying around this vast universe. So we're sort of pulling you back not only